Good evening. I'm your host, Shamika Rhymes. Welcome to Celebration. Let me know in the chat where you are watching from and how you're doing this evening. Are you staying cool? Because I don't know where you guys are, but where I am, it's a heat wave going on. So it's been really hot. So I see Asheville, Gastonia. Welcome, y'all. Now, remember to share this with your network. And if you have any questions at all tonight, you know you're the co host. So drop those questions and comments in the chat. So, this has gotten quite a bit of a buzz when I mentioned that we are doing this topic tonight. So I'm excited because, you know, I've had this conversation with so many people, and I'm sure you've talked about this in your own friend circles and with your therapist and just maybe in your journal. So, what do you do when life just doesn't go the way that you planned? Whether it's the end of a relationship, you thought you would get married, a career that didn't unfold the way that you hoped, or dreams that never came to be. That's a very real grief in letting go of the life you thought you'd have, right? So tonight, we are going to take a dive into how to navigate the pain of unmet expectations, from heartbreak to burnout to lost timelines. We're going to talk about how this kind of grief shows up and how to begin healing from it. We're going to learn about some different tools that you can put in your toolbox to help you, regulate those emotions and find peace, but also still have hope that those dreams can unfold. I see you, Gastonia. It's so hot here. I feel you. Let me introduce you to tonight's guest. Jihan Eley is a licensed grief and trauma therapist. She's a consultant and a speaker with over a decade of experience in community mental health and private practice. And she uses a lot of different tools. So I'm excited that she's joining us here tonight. Let's welcome Jihan.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you all.
Welcome. It is so good to see you. I know this is such a heavy topic, but I think it's a much needed discussion.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just kick it out of the box with, what does it even mean to grieve the life that you thought you'd have?
Yes, I think that we all grow up with expectations of what it means to have what you want in your life. From a very young age, people ask you, what do you want to do in your life? Where are you going to college? What kind of person do you want to marry? So I think off the bat, there's a lot of expectations that are put on us about what makes a good life. What are you actually entitled to have in your life, and how do you go about doing that? So I think making it an acknowledgement of what have what expectations have been put upon you about the type of life that people expect of you, and the type of life that you expect of yourself.
Okay. Because I feel like, I don't know that there's some people that have this, even when they're a child, they're like, I'm going to grow up, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have 50 kids, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And then there are those of us that are like, I'm just trying to get this dream job. And then you get that job and then you're like, I forgot about the husband, the wife, all the things. And then there's this grief that sets in of,
Mhm.
I don't have those things. And you're watching as your circle starts to get those things. So how do you handle that type of heaviness? And is that a grief when that occurs?
It is a grief. It's grief is anything that is associated with the missing experience that
Hmm.
you have, right? So not having a partner may feel like a loss of identity, a loss of belonging, a loss of security, stability. Um, as you mentioned before, future plans. A lot is attached to these dreams that we have that make us feel that like we're going to be safe in the world. I'm going to feel more safe in myself. I'm going to feel more safe in my family. I'm going to feel more safe in my peer group. Maybe if I have these things, maybe these things represent success. Maybe they represent happiness. Maybe they represent, making it, being the one in your family to maybe break generational curses.
Hmm. Yeah. I wore black today because of grief. I thought this would be appropriate. It's random, but I just thought I would share that. That is why I'm wearing black today, because I thought we tend to do that when we are grieving. how does this type of grief differ from grieving the loss of someone, that passed away? Because it's a different type of grief, a different type of feeling, a different type of it's like almost like a band-aid that continues to get ripped off depending on what you've seen on social media or what you've heard from someone, or if somebody just says, when you gonna have kids, then it gets ripped off again. So can you explain that difference a little bit?
Yes, I mean, grief, when we talk about a death loss, is when we've lost a loved one or lost someone meaningful in our lives. And so when we talk about these other secondary losses connected to grief, we are really exploring what are all the other losses that are associated with this maybe event or maybe social status or lack thereof.
Okay. I want to remind everybody in the chat to drop your questions and comments. But I'm just curious, what are you grieving? Is there anything that you're grieving about the life you thought you'd have? And, they all know I'm very transparent on here. I think I've been grieving the fact of not having a husband. And just because it's that constant, like, you're still not married, that gets old, y'all. So that's I'm going to put that one out there. That is what I am grieving. So let me know what you are grieving. What would you say to someone who feels like they've wasted years chasing a dream that just hasn't come true yet? Whether it is, I hear that a lot with career, or if they feel like they wasted time with a relationship. They spent a lot of time thinking this is this is going to lead to marriage. Next thing you know, they've been together 15 years, still not married, and then they're like, I wasted all this time.
Mhm. So when I hear that, a waste of time, I wonder, were you really connected to it in the first place?
Ooh, okay.
Wasted time means that like I've put in work, I've put in labor expecting a certain outcome.
Mm,
But were you emotionally invested? Were you just interested in the outcome? Or were you actually invested in the process to getting that outcome? Time is really precious. And so to think that you've been wasting time means that you haven't been connected to maybe the things that really do fill your cup or fulfill you or help you to feel a sense of joy in your
mhm.
life.
Well, how would you know how to do that? Because I feel like I didn't even recognize it as grief. Honestly, I just thought, why am I feeling so much like about this one topic? Why is it such a big deal? So how do you know that it even is grief when it comes to this? And how do you know, like, are you enjoying the process?
Mhm,
The answer is no. I hate dating, but are you enjoying the process? And are you like, let's use career as an example. Are
mhm.
you taking, learning stuff along the way and applying it each step of the journey? Like, how do you know that you're doing those things, or are there other things you should be doing to fill your cup? I'm sorry, and enjoy the process.
So I think it's very important to know what actually makes us feel good. How do you know that you like that color of lipstick? How do
Mhm,
you know that you like that flavor of ice cream? There
mhm,
are certain sensations or emotions connected to that lipstick color or that ice cream flavor. And so I think it's important to use that kind of information about, okay, how does this make me actually feel in my body? How does this make me actually feel about myself? Do I like that? Do I enjoy that
mhm,
experience or that feeling? And how do I create more of that feeling? How do I expand upon that? That's the first sign to, okay, I know what I want. I like how this feels, or this feels good, and I want and need more of this.
mhm.
Letting that be your guide.
I never thought about that. Yeah. Why do you think this type of grief is often overlooked or minimized? Or if you bring it up sometimes in a clinical setting with a doctor, you're like, I'm just in my feelings. And then they're like, oh, it's, here's an antidepressant, or it's, this or this or this, but it's never a zeroed in point of you may be experiencing grief.
Yes. I think that most of us have not been taught how to be with our emotions.
Yes.
Um, and so it's hard to discern what is actually grief
Hmm.
from just, oh, I'm having a bad day,
Yeah.
or I'm having a lot of frustration about like what my boss said to me yesterday. So
Hmm.
I think that being with emotions is very important for you to understand that, okay, like I've been experiencing this for a while. This is a reoccurring feeling for me that's not going away. And often it's connected to something old in your life. If something if is keeps coming up for you, um, and it's not just you know the anxiety, general anxiety of the day, or frustration again with a coworker or a boss,
Hmm.
um, and it's connected to your dreams, your future plans. There may be something deeper there. There's
Oh,
something missing, on your emotional landscape there.
oh, okay. So, what are some other things? I know we talked about relationship, we talked about career. What are other things that people could be grieving? I feel like those two are always, and the kids, and those are always like the top thing having of their own family. Those are always the top ones. Are there other ones that you've heard of that people could be grieving?
Yeah, so grieving maybe the relationship with your body changing.
Yes.
As we grow older, our bodies change. And so it's very can be very disorienting to not feel a certain way in your body, or have your clothes fit a certain way,
Hmm.
or like what you see in the mirror. That's a
Hmm.
very common one. Another grief that people experience is not having the same financial stability that maybe their parents had, or maybe not having the same level of support systems that maybe their parents were able to have in their own families. We
Hmm.
live in a more kind of disconnected type of society, so that there aren't as many supports as maybe there were in our parents' generations.
I see Sherry Dampier. I'm sorry if I'm messing your name up, but welcome from Brooklyn. She says she's grieving due to a health challenge. Do you hear a lot of that?
Yes, I mean, I certainly have clients who suffer with chronic health conditions, and so not being able to have the energy to show up at work with the level of energy that might be expected, or
Hmm.
not having the ability to keep up with their kids,
Yeah.
or enjoy, certain social outings with friends because they may not be feeling that well that day, or maybe even medical bills are mounting up, and they're not able to enjoy their lives that they want the way that they would like to.
Hmm. Um, that just made me think of, I didn't even realize this till you said it. When I had fibroids, your body changes how it looks. And there's a grieving process of just going through that experience. And I see Sherry also says retirement, grieving, being in retirement and getting older and burying your friends who are also your age. So do
Mhm.
you hear a lot of those as well?
Yes, of like, who am I now? Now that I've entered into this new phase of life,
Hmm.
what does that mean for me socially? What does that mean for
Yeah.
me, um, for just as my identity? How do I like myself? I'm so used to connecting with these friends, and now I don't know who's in my social circle anymore. Who do I talk to about what's going on in the world? Who do I share these like stresses that I have about, maybe my fears about what's going on in the world? And so
Mhm.
that's a major loss.
Okay. How about um, divorces? And I'm just trying to think of what else. Even the ending of a relationship, say that it had potential and it just fizzled or something happened, and the life that you thought you'd have with that person isn't going to happen now. Do you get that a
That
lot too?
Yes, it takes a lot of reimagining of what's possible after big changes like a divorce or a relationship that did not end the way that you wanted it to. And
Mhm.
so, oftentimes when we're in relationships, we've imagined, um, living out maybe the rest of our lives, and we had plans to vacation here, and we had plans to go to see different friends and go to certain concerts. And so losing that um, is a really really great loss, as to, okay, so who am I now that I
Yeah.
don't have that in my life anymore?
Mhm.
do
Yeah.
i like who I'm do I like myself and who I'm left with?
Mhm. Yeah, that's huge. I recall telling my friend not too long ago, I was like, when I got out of a long-term relationship, it was so bad. I didn't even know what kind of pizza I liked because I was so used to ordering pizza with what he liked. And so it was like, oh, I get what I want now. He's gone. But it was like discovering these little things. But it was that first time ordering pizza that just about brought me to my knees because it was like, oh gosh, what do I order?
Right, so you're talking about like almost a bit of a trauma
Yeah.
response of like,
Yeah.
I feel disoriented, I feel disconnected from who I am and what I like and what I
Hmm.
need. And so not knowing that um, can be really, really scary and kind of overwhelming for a lot of
Hmm.
people, of like, okay, now I have to figure all of that out
Yeah.
again.
Hmm. Yeah. And then I thought, well, I should have put the pineapples on the pizza anyway, just to just I shouldn't have had the pizzas with what he wanted.
Well, and that's a good point. I think,
Yeah.
part of of healing, the healing journey is reconnecting to yourself and
Hmm.
connecting to connecting back to the things that you enjoyed, and connecting to the things that um, feel fulfilling to you.
Hmm. Well, how can someone balance gratitude for what they have? You know, say they're grieving that all their friends have these big brand new houses and they're still living in an apartment and they're sad over that. But how can they have gratitude for, like, you still have a roof over your head, you still have somewhere to stay, versus sitting there being sad over what they don't have. So how do you balance that?
I think that, like, it again, I think it comes back to, how do I connect back to with what is.
Hmm.
A lot of um, grief work has to do with being with what is. It's not um, that we're trying to, it's not going to erase what's happened, right? But how can we be with what is? How can we slow down and appreciate other good things in our life? How can we start to take that in and really, really reflect on, what other good things do I have in my life that I really appreciate, that I really admire, that I really um, adore, um, and feel grateful for?
So, how about when you feel like there are so many aspects of your life that you're grieving and you just still can't see the good things? Then what?
So I think that grief should not be done alone. I think that grief does need witnessing. It needs to be acknowledged. Grief needs a community of others can um, who can relate to your experience, who can share in your experience, and really be companions on that journey with you. And so I
Mhm.
think that undoing one's aloneness is very important here. That, like, grief certainly needs witnessing. It needs community, to be able to share a hug or share a story or a song, or a poem or a
Mhm.
walk in nature with someone. to be able to see, like, well, what else out here is possible for me? What else more can I
Yeah.
experience? And to help me move beyond this pain that I'm experiencing now.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to go ahead and preface this with I don't know if y'all just heard that big clap of thunder. So if my internet drops off, that is what happened. um, but how can grief show up in the body? Because I think that's important. I know for me, there are certain areas where I'm like, if I'm holding it in my jaw or my lower
Mhm.
back or something like that, then I'm like, I know what this is. Or if my chest feels a little like not like it'll feel a specific way whereas like okay I know I haven't cried in a while and it could be am I grieving the loss of a person or am I going back to grieving you know whatever it is. So where does it show up most of the time in the body or in the nervous system?
Yeah, so I think grief is connected to our heart. And so grief can certainly affect our lungs, our breathing. We might be breathing a little bit more shallow, or
Yeah.
our breathing might be constricted. And so that's where you might feel like there's more constriction or
Hmm.
tension in your shoulders, in your back, in your neck. You might have more migraines or headaches. Um, you might even feel a lot of tightness in your hips. We hold a lot of our emotions
Yes.
in our hips, right?
Hmm.
Because grief can also slow us down.
Hmm.
And so grief can really make us really tight in those areas. And so that certainly leads to tight hamstrings, maybe knee issues. But I've also seen, and I'll say this, when I lost my father, I broke out in hives.
Wow.
The
Yeah.
whole body broke out in hives. So I had an allergic reaction um,
Hmm.
on his birthday. So it was his first birthday after he died, and I broke out
Hmm.
in hives. And I've had other clients who have also similarly had allergic reactions, most likely due to the stress and
Yeah.
your body's immune system being compromised. So your body's immune system is not able to operate as it normally does. And so it's not able to go in and fight any pathogens or any
Oh,
allergens the way that it
yeah.
might normally do.
Now you're reminding me of some things like, yeah, I do see the chat is relating to this one. I see Sherry says grief in the body for her high blood pressure, disruption in sleep patterns, appetite issues. Lynn Hickson Tinney says grief affects her blood pressure. Ayana Phillips says, I agree 100. I'm truly feeling all those symptoms. Same. Sherry also says grief can also lead to behavior changes, being melancholy or bitter.
Yes, to all of those, right? So it really does impact your entire body.
Yeah.
Um, right? It has to do with how your whole nervous system is functioning, right? And so
Mhm.
your nervous system functioning affects everything else. And so if you already have prior health conditions, those could be exacerbated by
Mhm. Yeah. Sherry also says grief in the body, weight gain or weight loss due to that shift in your eating routine. Because, yeah, some people stress eat and some people just stop eating. So, yeah, there's so many things. And honestly, my grief counselor shared with me because I'm one of those that sometimes I'm like I ain't gonna cry. I'm tough. I ain't gonna cry.
grief.
But she's like, go to yoga. At least
Mhm.
move those things out of the body. And I remember maybe my second yoga class. We were in child's pose,
Mhm.
and it just the instructor said one thing that reminded me of my grandfather who had just passed,
Mhm.
and I just laid on that mat and cried. But I felt so much better because it was almost like it released from my hips
Right.
and stretched it up out of my back. And so yoga has been my go-to or stretching. If I can't go to yoga, I'm stretching, you know, trying to at least make sure it's not getting stuck in there. Or if I feel like I need to cry, my grief counselor shared just I can't do this because I cannot cry on command. But she said, schedule time. Like if you
Mhm.
got time Friday at 3 o'clock, you sit there and feel your feelings.
Yes, I think grief wants to move, right? So what you're
Yeah.
talking about is with movement being introduced, you were then able to release, right?
Yeah.
Oftentimes our body needs permission that it's actually safe to cry,
Hmm.
right? So often of us have received the message that it's not okay to cry. It's not to be upset or get angry. And so giving your body permission to say, you know what? I can actually feel these feelings. I can provide a space to release them
Hmm.
can be very, very healing.
Absolutely. And I did also want to say, I still go to yoga, even though it may not just be to focus on that particular grief. Because, like I said, I'm like everybody else, grieving a lot of different things. So it is helpful. And I see Sherry says exercising can help, movement of the body helps. And she also says grief can cause you to pause in making necessary decisions.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
Right? Because oftentimes it disconnects us from, you know, who we are and what we love and what we need. And so oftentimes it can put us almost in like in a freeze response, right?
Yeah.
Where our body shuts down. We might go into a place of despair or hopelessness. And so
Hmm.
it's kind of hard to get connected to what keeps us going and what makes us feel alive.
What are some ways that people could be unconsciously carrying this grief without naming it? Because we did list like all the places their body could be holding it, but are there some other ways they could be carrying the grief and not even realize it?
Yes, so I think that um, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who invented the 5 stages of grief, um, describes all the ways in which grief can be expressed. And
Hmm.
so the acronym that I use for that is DABDA. So D for denial. Um, so denial can show up in a lot of different ways, right? That like, oh, I'm not upset. I'm
Yeah.
okay. I can still show up to work, 3 days after whatever it is, how
Hmm.
long. Um, I can still do those favors for those people, right? And yet you might be
Hmm.
dealing with a lot of tension in your body.
Yeah.
You might be pushing through a lot of pain. Um, the second stage of the model is um, anger,
Yep.
right? So if you notice yourself getting really short with people or getting really frustrated, maybe with somebody at the grocery store, or maybe something didn't really go as smoothly as you wanted to,
Hmm.
and it becomes this thing that you really hyper focus on and you have a hard time letting it go. Um, so anger, right?
Hmm.
Maybe lashing out at other people, other family members.
Hmm.
Um, Bargaining is the third stage, right? Of like, why, why, why is this happening to me? If only if I did this,
Hmm.
maybe this would be different. So going over in your mind of maybe blaming yourself, being self-critical, um,
Hmm.
and self-loathing,
Hmm.
um, all the regrets and the what ifs that go on
Yeah.
in your mind. Um, and then depression, right?
Hmm.
Depression is also a sign of really immense sadness
Hmm.
over the loss, um, beyond what's normal for you. Right?
Right.
I'm gonna put a time on it, but what's beyond normal for you?
Hmm.
And that fifth stage is acceptance of like trying to make peace with the reality, but maybe struggling with it. Of like, I
Hmm.
just can't understand why they would do that to me. Why
Yeah.
would they, why would they end things with me? And we've had this beautiful relationship and all the things that I've done for them. And so
Hmm.
struggling with that. So um, all of those 5 stages I named are often common experiences that all people may experience um, through any type of grief, but also can be defenses against feeling your emotions.
Yeah. So how I think about sometimes when you can tell that when sometimes when people's feelings are hurt, they run to social media to tell it all. If it's a relationship, it's like he did this, she did this, da 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 da, and they tell the whole thing. Is that also kind of a grief because they're trying to basically put everything out there? Like this is what they did to me. Let me embarrass. If I'm gonna be embarrassed, I'm embarrassing you. You know what I mean?
Well, that could be a type of anger, right? Of
Okay.
I
Yeah.
need I need to get my feelings validated somewhere, right? That
Right.
person that they may have an issue with, they may not have validated their feelings. And so they may feel like, okay, well, if they're not going to validate it, where else can I go get that validation? And so
Mm,
that for a lot of people, that's on the internet. And a lot of
yeah.
people will crash out on the internet that way.
Hmm. Yeah. Even with career stuff, I've seen people um, from sitting in their car recording themselves crying, sitting somewhere doing a whole video about, or even a post about maybe how unfair it is that they didn't get this promotion or they didn't get this job. I mean, what is your advice for running to social media when you are grieving the life you thought you'd have?
Well, I think it's really important that you find safe people that you can share these losses with. Um,
Hmm.
People that you can be vulnerable with, people that um, can understand what you're going through, or may have some experience it with themselves.
Hmm.
I think that, especially in the grieving process, you do want to feel heard, you do want to feel seen, and so the best place to do that is with other people who get it. And
Yeah.
so if you don't have people who are in your inner circle who get it, right, that's where um, you might find maybe a grief support group, or you might find communities on the internet who are focused on supporting each other through whatever that issue or whatever that event or loss is around.
Yeah. Okay. Well, how or can you use somatic or trauma informed practices to help move through this type of grief? I mean, I know we're talking about, grieving dreams that haven't come to fruition yet. And then I also was curious if EMDR can help with that.
Yes, yes. I think that really, because grief um, is so impactful to the body, it's important to go to the body to help to heal it, right? Because that's where
Hmm.
we're holding all of our emotions. That's where we're holding all of the memories, or maybe all of the unfulfilled dreams that we had. That all lives in our body. So not only finding community, I'll always stress the importance of community, um, but also, again, learning your nervous system. What helps
Hmm.
me to feel grounded? What helps me to feel relaxed in my body? Where in my body feels positive or neutral that I can maybe focus on or even meditate on to remind me of that, like, everything's not all bad, right?
Yeah.
So that if I focus on this one area in my body that feels neutral or that feels really positive, how can I expand upon that? How can I express maybe appreciation or gratitude, or even honor that part of my body, right? Because my body's been getting me through all of this
Right.
entire time, right? This body's allowing me to wake up the next day and you know to live and to do whatever I need to do. So how can I also just express appreciation for my body?
Hmm.
I would also add that I think building a positive relationship with your body, that can certainly take time and may need others
Yeah.
to help with. But sometimes even just placing a hand on your heart
Hmm.
and placing another hand on your belly and just feeling the warmth of your hands
Hmm.
at those points of connection, and just like noticing your heartbeat,
Yeah.
just noticing your chest like rising and falling with each breath of like, I'm here.
Hmm.
I have survived through this up until this point, and I'm still going. And so that can be a moment to appreciate yourself.
Yeah.
So right, even that, right, that whenever we bring a hand to the heart, that can naturally just kind of slow our breathing down. That can naturally just help our nervous system to relax. Um, Letting your body know that it's actually safe here in
Hmm.
this moment, right? In this moment, I am safe. In this moment, I am okay. And so,
Hmm.
right there, I just added a simple embodiment practice with a little bit of affirmation.
Yeah. I like that. Well, when it comes to those unfulfilled dreams, I don't want to tell people to let it go, but do you think they should let it go? Or do you think they should still have hope, but maybe change the expectation? What are your thoughts?
Well, for some things, I think that um, you know you will never not feel maybe that loss around that thing, right? That may
Yeah.
always be a tender spot for you. Um, I will say that while that may not change, that might always be a tender thing. Maybe your relationship to it changes. Maybe it doesn't feel as distressing, or maybe it doesn't have that like negative charge to it, because maybe I'm creating new experiences in my life
Hmm.
that help me to not feel as um, disappointed, make me not feel as heartbroken or as pained as I once did, because I'm starting to create this life that's not being overshadowed by that loss or that event. That I'm creating um, a life on what's
Hmm.
possible for me.
Okay. You guys, we have a few more minutes. If you have questions, make sure you drop them in the chat. I do see some comments in the chat. Let me scroll back up and look at these really quick. Um, I do see, um, and I'm sorry for those of you that are expressing, my condolences to those expressing the loss of loved ones in the chat. I do see you. Um, Sherry also says finding your new self as you deal with grief, because you do kind of have to adjust and accept, that your life as is. Robinette Leverett says, I grieve loneliness. She's a congestive heart patient, and the stresses of life make her tense and in chronic pain. And she saw two sisters and her parents through death. So she's lonely. So, yes, there's, and even with that, the loneliness aspect, can we talk about that for a second? Because you could be lonely from not having a partner, you can be lonely from losing loved ones. How do you deal with that? Because those are two different things. But how do you deal with those two different things? And then if you're experiencing both at the same time, then what?
Right. I always say the antidote to loneliness is connection.
Hmm.
Right? Looking at, okay, where can I get connected in my life? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's with maybe it's with a book club, maybe it's with a walking club, maybe it's you saying, you know what, I always wanted to be an artist.
Yeah.
Maybe I always wanted to like pick up singing.
Mm-hmm.
That this is the time for you to think about, what are the things that I've been connected to in the past? And am I still connected to those? How can I start to explore that and bring that into my current experience right now? And explore, right? Like this is you talk about creating or building a new self. That means exploration has to happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? How can I explore these different parts of myself, right? Because the part of you that's grieving is only just one part of you. There's all these other parts of you that exist,
Mm-hmm.
right? All these parts of you that make you you. And so,
Right.
how can we start to get curious about that?
And I'm not sure if anybody else in the comments has dealt with this, but when you are in that grieving mode and isolating, so you don't want to connect, you just want to have a pity party, then what?
Well, and that's not all bad, you know.
Okay.
Sometimes that's actually necessary. Sometimes that's actually healthy,
Hmm.
right? Sometimes it's not. I think we can't be in it all the time because then
Yeah.
that would be too overwhelming. And then we
Hmm.
wouldn't want to like go and explore and be curious about these different parts. So I think at
Hmm.
times it can be healthy to engage in a healthy amount of distraction
Hmm.
so that it can help us to have the energy um, to explore when that feels right for us.
I see a couple comments. Lynn Hickson Tenney says she deals with loneliness by taking classes online, following travel groups because her husband has Alzheimer's and is a stroke victim.
Yes.
Sherry says sometimes if you lose a loved one, and I'm thinking about this even in relationships too, those friendships that are connected to that person also kind of dies as well.
Yeah, that's one of those secondary losses of like, here's the major loss, but then here's all the losses that um,
Hmm.
get get attached to that because of that initial loss. And so that's certainly something to also honor, right? That like not only have I lost this really important person, but I've also lost these other important relationships. And
Hmm.
so really, right, you may have done a lot of ritual in terms of funeral around right that initial loss, but how can
Hmm.
you also honor those other losses that you've experienced?
Right. Well, what is the connection between, say, grieving the life you thought you'd have, um, and burnout, especially with high achievers? Because I didn't realize it at the time. And as people are saying, I looked up to you because you've been hustling, you were doing this and you were doing this. And I was like, did I sleep? you know, because it's just like you just get locked in on something and you're just like, I'm going after this dream. I'm going after this dream. I don't see nothing else. I'm just going after, and then you burn out at some point.
Right.
So, what are some, is there a connection to that? This is the life I thought I'd have, and now I'm burnt out.
Yeah, I mean, in what you just described, right? I hear a lot of sacrifice, right? That I've
Hmm.
sacrificed maybe these other parts of me that exist in order for this like bigger goal that I had in mind, right? And
Yeah.
so how do I get reconnected back to those parts that I sacrificed, that I
Hmm.
maybe put on the back burner in order to achieve this greater goal?
Hmm.
Um, Again, this is all about, um, at the heart of it is really connection, right?
Hmm.
We are grieving something because of the connection that we had,
Mm.
right? And the
Yeah, that
piece
makes
of that
sense.
connection, right? So how do we create connection in other parts of our life? How do we also maybe stay, if we're talking about a death loss,
Hmm.
how do we continue that bond with that person, right? That's
Hmm.
maybe no longer here in the
Yeah.
physical realm.
Hmm. Well, you mentioned it's that loss of connection as far as the burnout, but what if you still didn't achieve whatever that career goal was or is? It could be one of those things where you're like, it's just, I'm getting older. It's not going to happen. Um, I'm burnt out now anyway, because I've been going for hard for so long,
Mhm.
because now then grief sets in and you're burned out. So how do you deal with that aspect of it because you haven't reached whatever goal that you were reaching for?
Well, and I think acknowledging the things that you did achieve, I
Hmm.
think is important here,
Yeah.
right? Acknowledging the dream, acknowledging the effort, acknowledging all the hard work that went into it.
Hmm.
And maybe it didn't work out for that particular goal that you set. But what if the work that you put in could be used towards something else? How can we transform that experience
Hmm.
into something else that could be meaningful to you?
That's a good one. Yeah. I'm just curious with the chat. Have you guys dealt with that, the grief and burnout at the same time, because you haven't reached that whatever that goal is? And then I know we're running out of time, but I'm also curious about because the question I think I had: how do you help people shift from blame to like that acceptance that because even with say it's a relationship that ended and you're still so you may be not as angry as you were, but say years have gone by and you're still blaming them for the fact that you're still single or that you're still not married or whatever. How do you shift out of that?
Well, and so that may be a sign that something deeper is going on,
Okay.
right? So the anger that you may have for a past partner
Hmm.
may also belong to a family member
Hmm.
that maybe you don't have the ability or you don't feel that maybe you have the courage to express your feelings to, but it's much easier to put all of your feelings towards that former partner.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So grief can also be something that is accumulated over time.
Hmm.
And so sometimes our present day experiences can activate old experiences that we have not grieved, that are still unresolved, that still live in our body. And anything that looks close to the old experience in the present day, it feels like that all over again. And so there
Wow. I
may be
never
a
thought.
part of you, yeah, there may be a part of you, maybe a child part of you
Hmm.
that's 10 years old that may be struggling with the abandonment from a parent. And so
Hmm.
when a partner maybe doesn't show up for you in the ways that you want, it feels really close to the
Hmm.
experience of that 10-year-old. And that's what makes it feel maybe so overwhelming. That's what makes it feel like, oh, I just can't get over why they didn't treat me right.
Hmm.
But it may be because you're holding other unresolved, unprocessed griefs from past versions of you.
Oh, so how do you handle that? If it's your 10-year-old self that's still upset, how do you handle that?
Well, the 10-year-old self may not have had parents or a community where they felt safe enough to express their feelings.
Hmm.
And so that 10-year-old still may need to have that emotional release. And
Ah.
so going back to that 10-year-old and really acknowledging that 10-year-old's feelings and needs
Hmm.
and asking yourself, do I still have those feelings and needs today? How can I start to meet those? So I can not only start to heal that 10-year-old, but I
Hmm.
can also heal this adult version of myself today.
Now, how long does all that take?
Well, that is, I certainly recommend having a partner like a therapist
Hmm.
or a coach or some somatic practitioner to help you process through some of those maybe old unprocessed griefs from the past.
Okay. Well, to wrap this up, what does healing look like, ultimately, once you've gone to a therapist or, you've implemented moving your body, kind of doing that reflective work on is this my 10-year-old self that's still mad? Or, just whatever it is you're grieving, what
Mhm.
is there even healing for grieving those unmet dreams and unfulfilled dreams?
I think that it's ongoing, right? Like we don't stop growing. We don't
Hmm.
stop connecting with others. So I think there's no like end date to healing.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's the way that we make meaning of those experiences. It's the way that we transform those experiences um, that help us to move forward in our lives.
Okay. All right. Oh, goodness. This conversation, we might have to do a part two because this has been so good. Well, I asked this of all my guests. What feeds your soul?
So, what feeds my soul, on this topic is, feeding all my younger parts of myself. When I'm able to feed, the needs of the younger parts of myself, I help the part of me that's sitting here today. It also helps me be a better parent. It helps me be a better therapist. It helps me to show up and be a better friend and villager. Um, and so when I'm taking care of myself,
Mm-hmm.
right, I can be of service to other people. I can take care of others. I can take care of myself.
That's a great reminder to take care of ourselves, put ourselves first,
Yeah.
which we have talked a lot about on this show. Put yourself first, make yourself a priority. Move your body, y'all, move your body. Well, how can people reach out to you if they want to follow you on social media, or if they have some more questions that they maybe didn't want to put in the chat? Is there a way they can reach out to you?
Absolutely. So my private practice is called True Other Wellness. And so you can visit my website at trueotherwellness.com. And you can also find me on Instagram at that same handle, True Other Wellness.
Perfect. I want to thank you again for coming on and sharing. It looks like you helped a lot of us today. Myself included, and a lot of those in the chat. Thank you all in the chat as well for being transparent and open and sharing what you're grieving. And I hope we all get our dreams fulfilled and that we continue healing as we continue growing. So thank you so much, Jahan.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, for more information about everything we talked about today, grief, mental health, therapy, somatic practices, head over to blackdoctor.org. There's articles and resources there. Next week, I'm switching it up a little bit, y'all. It's 7 o'clock on Tuesday next week. So coming up on Celebration, July is Fibroid Awareness Month. And so we're going to be getting real about what many of us have gone through, being misdiagnosed, dismissed, or pushed into surgery without real options. So you guys come back Tuesday, 7 o'clock. We're going to talk all about fibroids and, they're the different treatment options that you can explore before jumping to surgery. So I will see you guys on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Have a soul filled rest of the week and have a good night. Thank you. I don't know if it stopped or not. I don't think it did. Or did it stop on your end?